There's a door in southern India that nobody will open. A tomb in China that could be opened tomorrow and won't be. All over the planet, there are places where the evidence is right there. We know exactly where it sits, and somebody has decided we're not going in. Let's get right into it. Number 9, the sealed vault. Under a temple in southern India, there are 6 underground chambers. In 2011, a court-appointed team opened 5 of them. Gold coins by the sack, ceremonial ornaments, gemstones nobody had counted in centuries. And then they reached the 6th chamber and stopped. It's called Vault B. The door has serpents carved into it. Tradition says it's sealed by a mantra, and that forcing it invites something worse than bad luck. There's no evidence for a curse. That part is folklore. But a belief doesn't have to be true to hold a door shut. The temple's traditional custodians objected. The case climbed all the way to India's Supreme Court, which in 2020 left the decision with the people who don't want it opened. Officials were still arguing about it in committee meetings 5 years later. So look at where that leaves archaeology. The chamber isn't lost. It isn't under a modern city or at the bottom of the sea. It's roughly 20 feet from a room full of people who know exactly where it is. And nobody's going in. Here's the part nobody enjoys saying. We don't know what's inside. Could be more gold. Could be silt and a cracked pot. The mystery isn't the treasure. It's that a wooden door beat modern science on a technicality. And the technicality was somebody saying no. That's a ban built on belief. The next one looks like superstition too until you test the soil. Number 8, the Mercury Emperor. In 1974, farmers digging a well outside Sienne pulled up a clay head. What they'd hit was an army. Around 8,000 life-size soldiers standing underground in formation, each one with a different face. Here's the part that usually gets skipped. The terracotta army isn't the tomb, it's the security detail. The burial mound of China's first emperor sits about a mile away, under a hill you can walk right up to. As far as anyone can tell, it's still sealed. A century after he died, the historian Sima Qian wrote that the chamber held rivers of liquid mercury, laid out as a map of the empire. For 2,000 years, that read like poetry. Then a soil survey in 1981 found mercury around the mound far higher than that landscape should produce. And a 2020 study picked up mercury vapor still rising through the dirt. The poetry checked out. But mercury isn't why China won't dig. Those soldiers weren't gray, they were painted, pinks, greens, reds, over a thin lacquer skin. Dry air hit that lacquer and it curled straight off the clay, taking the color with it, in some cases within minutes. Colors that had lasted 22 centuries gone while people stood there watching. So China's position translates to something institutions hate admitting out loud. We're not good enough yet. Everything in that chamber gets one chance at being seen, and they'd rather it not be us. Sounds like a convenient excuse. Then you look at France, where we already ran the experiment. Number 7, the cave that died. 4 teenagers and a dog found Lascaux in 1940. Inside were hundreds of animals painted around 17,000 years ago in ochre and charcoal, so alive that people started calling it the Sistine Chapel of the Stone Age. Then we opened it to tourists. This is where it turns grim. To make the cave walkable, crews widened the entrance, poured concrete, installed lighting, and hauled out hundreds of cubic meters of the cave floor. Remember that floor. It comes back at the end. By the 1950s, over 1,000 people a day were filing through, every one of them breathing warm, wet air into a chamber that had sat at roughly the same temperature since the last ice age. The cave got sick. Conservators literally named the diseases. Green sickness was algae blooming across the paintings, feeding on the electric lights. White sickness was calcite veiling the animals, driven by all that exhaled carbon dioxide. France closed Lascaux in 1963. Antibiotics beat the algae. The calcite stopped spreading but couldn't be removed, so those veils are still sitting on the art. Then in 2001, after new climate machinery went in, a black fungus swept the walls anyway. Today, hardly anyone gets in. Tourists visit replicas. Millions of people have now seen a very good copy of Lascaux. Very few living humans have seen Lascaux. It didn't die of neglect or looting or war. It died of attention, 15 years of it. That's a ban you can defend with a microscope. The next one comes with no explanation at all. Number 6, Japan's locked graves. Fly over Osaka and you'll spot a keyhole cut into the city, a tree-covered mound wrapped in 3 moats parked in the middle of a suburb like something everyone quietly agreed not to mention. That's Daisen Kofun, nearly half a kilometer long, one of the largest tomb structures built by anyone, anywhere. Japan has roughly 160,000 of these burial mounds, built between about the 3rd and 7th centuries, exactly when Japan was assembling itself into a state. Many of the biggest are administered as active imperial graves, not historical sites, graves, and archaeologists generally aren't let inside. We got one accidental look. In 1872, a slope collapsed and exposed a stone coffin near the front of the mound. Swords, armor, glass vessels, recorded, sketched, sealed back up. That landslide is still a large share of everything we know about the interior. In 2018, after years of pressure, outside researchers were finally allowed to dig alongside the agency. 3 trenches on the outer embankments, not the burial chamber and the edges, and even that made national news. The stated reason is respect for the dead. Some historians suspect excavation might complicate the story of an unbroken native imperial line, though that's a suspicion, not a finding. Either way, the result is identical. The founding centuries of Japanese history are sitting under a beautifully maintained lawn, and the grass is the lock. At least Japan has an agency with an address. Some ground has nobody in charge at all. Number 5, untouchable ground. 35 acres in Jerusalem carry more religious weight per square foot than anywhere on the planet. The Temple Mount, or Haram al-Sharif, is sacred to 3 faiths at once and sits inside a live political conflict. It has never had a systematic archaeological excavation. Everything we know about what's underneath comes from texts, from the edges, and from luck. Then in 1999, luck did something strange. Construction work to convert an underground space into a mosque removed roughly 9,000 tons of earth with heavy machinery without archaeological supervision. The soil got trucked out and dumped in a nearby valley. 2 archaeologists went and retrieved it. Since 2004, they've been washing that dirt through screens, bucket by bucket, mostly with volunteers. The haul is enormous. Hundreds of thousands of finds, coins by the thousand, Iron Age seal impressions, fragments of ornate stone floor tiles from the Herodian period. So why do archaeologists find this heartbreaking instead of heroic? Because the object is only half the information, the other half is where it sat. Which layer, above what, beside what, sealed under which floor. That's how you date things. That's how you prove sequence. The dirt is the document, the artifact is just one word in it. Picture running a library through a shredder, then patiently collecting every scrap of paper. You now own every word from every book. You have no idea which book any of them came from. That's the most contested ground on Earth, hundreds of thousands of real artifacts, and very little recoverable history. It's the cleanest proof of what a dig actually is. Not finding things, not destroying the order you found them in. Nations fighting over dirt is one kind of problem. The next band comes from families. Number 4, buried twice. 2 men walking a riverbank in Washington State in 1996 found a human skull in the shallows. What eroded out of that bank was a nearly complete skeleton, dated to somewhere between 8 and 9,000 years old. Among the oldest and most intact human remains ever recovered in North America. Scientists called him Kennewick Man. 5 Columbia Plateau tribes called him the Ancient One and asked for him back. He'd surfaced on federal land, which triggered a 1990 law requiring Native American remains found there to be returned to affiliated tribes. So everything hinged on one question: was he Native American? Early readings of his skull shape suggested he wasn't. 8 scientists sued to keep studying him. In 2002, a court agreed the law didn't apply. The tribes kept fighting. This ran 20 years. Then in 2015, a team in Copenhagen sequenced his genome from a finger bone. He came out closer to living Native Americans than to any other population on Earth, with particular affinity to one of the very tribes claiming him. A second lab confirmed it. Congress moved. On February 18, 2017, more than 200 tribal members received his remains and reburied him somewhere that's never been disclosed. Sit with that irony, because it's a clean one. The technology that finally answered the question was the last technology ever applied to him. The test that ended the argument also ended the research. Whatever else those bones could have said about the first Americans, they aren't saying it now. Descendants have a claim on their dead. That one's at least arguable. It gets much harder when the people telling us to stay away are still alive. Number 3, the island that refuses. There's a small forested island in the Bay of Bengal with a coral reef around it and a few dozen people living on it who have made their position extremely clear for as long as anyone's been asking. North Sentinel Island is Indian territory and Indian law forbids approaching it. The Sentinelese have turned away nearly every attempt at contact. After the 2004 tsunami, a helicopter flew over to check for survivors and a man walked onto the beach and shot arrows at it, which is both a rejection and, in fairness, a very efficient status update. 2 fishermen who drifted ashore in 2006 were killed. In 2018, a young American missionary paid a boat crew to get him close, went in anyway, and died on the sand. The law protecting them isn't sentimental, it's medical. A population isolated that long carries no acquired immunity to infections the rest of us shrug off, and the historical record here is brutal. Other Andaman groups collapsed dramatically within decades of sustained outside contact in the 1800s. A handshake could be an extinction event, which leaves a hole in the human story shaped exactly like an island. The Andaman Islanders are thought to descend from some of the earliest human movements into Asia. North Sentinel has never had an archaeological survey. No trench, no sample, no carbon date, nothing. And notice what changed. Every other ban so far came from a court, a ministry, or a church. This one comes from the people who actually live there. The entire apparatus of modern science has been reduced to standing offshore and respecting it. They refuse everybody. The next place lets in exactly one man. Number 2, the room with one key. In the Ethiopian city of Aksum stands a chapel with a fence around it. Inside, according to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, is the Ark of the Covenant. The chapel is guarded by a single monk. Not a rotation, not a security detail. One man, appointed for life, who lives inside the enclosure and doesn't leave it. He alone may look at the object. He names his own successor. And when he dies, the new guardian steps in and the door closes again. Not the patriarch, not the government, not visiting heads of state, certainly not archaeologists. So no researcher has ever examined it. No photograph, no measurement, no material analysis, no dating. Most historians outside the tradition are skeptical of the claim, and they're entitled to be. But skepticism isn't evidence. And here, nobody has any. It sits in a permanent third category. Not confirmed, not refuted, not testable. That's what makes it strange compared to everything else on this list. Every other site is a fact we simply haven't reached yet. This one is set up so that reaching it isn't an option. The mystery isn't protected by distance or technology or law. It's protected by procedure. And that design has a real cost. When conflict swept through the region a few years ago, Aksum sat inside a war zone, and the honest answer to "is the object safe" was that essentially nobody could say, because checking would mean breaking the one rule that defines the whole thing. Every ban so far was imposed on archaeology from outside. The strictest rule in the entire field was written by archaeologists about themselves. Number 1, the rule we wrote ourselves. In 2017, a team announced a hidden space inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, more than 30 meters long, sitting above the Grand Gallery. First major internal structure found in that pyramid since the 1800s, and they found it without touching a single stone, by reading cosmic ray particles as they pass through solid limestone, an X-ray the size of a mountain. Then they did nothing. Years later, that void still hasn't been entered. When the same team confirmed a second hidden corridor behind the pyramid's north face, they didn't cut a hole. They threaded a 6mm camera through a gap that already existed between 2 blocks. The corridor was empty. They looked, they learned, they left no mark. That restraint is the real answer to this whole video. Excavation is destruction. When you dig a site, you take it apart, and it doesn't go back. You get one reading of it, ever. So the modern practice is to deliberately leave parts of important sites untouched on purpose for people with better tools. Now remember the cave floor at Lascaux. Hundreds of cubic meters shoveled out to build a walkway. In 2017, researchers pulled ancient human DNA directly out of cave sediment. No bones present at all. The dirt itself was the archive. Every generation before us threw the archive away to get at the pretty objects and had no idea they were doing it. So most of these forbidden places aren't being hidden from you by kings or governments or curses. They're being held in trust for someone who hasn't been born yet. The most forbidden place on Earth isn't a place, it's a date. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them. End